Hi, I'm Don from DonDronesOn, and welcome to my monthly update on my Starlink internet experience. If you haven't already done so, check out my previous videos with installation tips, networking tips, and my monthly episodes so far. While you're at it, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for notifications. This month, I'll share some Starlink news, give you an update on my performance numbers, answer some questions about Wi-Fi performance, and wind it up with a fascinating time lapse showing just how much that little dish actually moves. So the big news this month is that Starlink has quietly slipped out of beta mode, and without any real fanfare, it seems the product is in full proper release mode. Not surprisingly, other than the fact that the word beta is gone from the website, there's absolutely no difference in the service or availability. Lots of you guys are still waiting for your dishes, and I feel for you. Satellites keep going up into orbit, and those of us who have the system installed are absolutely loving it. Well, my wife and I are anyways. They've also announced a new model of the dish and router. The dish itself is rectangular and about half the weight of the original dish, which will really help with installation. The cable from the dish to the router is now shorter though, only 75 feet instead of 100 feet, but it is detachable and extendable with additional lengths available from the Starlink shop. There are also additional mounting options now, including a wall mounting bracket. All of this will make installation a bit easier and certainly more flexible. A strange regression on the router though. It no longer has a built-in Ethernet out port. But all is not lost. There is an adapter, but you have to buy it, with an Ethernet port so you can plug your existing wired network, mesh network, and what have you into the Starlink router. Don't forget to buy that when your number does come up and you're being offered the new style of dish. So far, this new style is available only in the US. Okay, let's move on to my performance measurements for November. The first metric that I've been tracking is the number of dropout events per hour. A dropout is an outage long enough to impact an MS Teams or Zoom call. I've been watching this very carefully and determined that outages of about 11 seconds or more cause a "Don? Don? Are you there?" reaction from my teammates at work. Dropouts less than that might make a bit of a warble on the audio, but are no big deal. As you can see, the performance in November was really good, 0.2 events per hour, which translates to about 1 or 2 hits over the course of a working day if you're on MS Teams all day long. My second metric is the total number of outage minutes per day, really a measure of total downtime. November came in at 3.1 minutes per day, almost twice as good as October. But this gives credence to the theory that I mentioned last time, that the number in September, the really low number, was screwed up for some reason. Anyways, 3.1 minutes, considering that most of these outages are really short, is perfectly acceptable for me. I know this might not be good enough if you're an avid video game player, but for me, it's fine. Now, as you know, if you've been watching my previous videos, I do have some obstruction issues due to trees. At least part of this improvement in November is because all of the leaves have dropped from the deciduous trees on my west side, so fewer obstructions. But I still have a big spruce providing some obstruction there. All that said, I have a strong suspicion that Mr. Dish has had some software upgrades that allows it to learn and avoid permanently blocked regions. Check out the obstruction map. Places that used to be red, obstructions, are now totally black. Now, does this mean that it now considers these areas not even worth attempting? This would be a huge step forward. And by the way, that was my third wish from my September video. Don't try connecting to satellites in areas that have known obstructions. Yay, they did it. And by the way, you'll notice that they also fixed the little bug I reported last time about east and west being reversed. Okay, how about speed and latency? This is kind of a strange story. At the beginning of the month, the download speeds were way better than October, but later measurements were noticeably worse. And the histogram seems to reflect this. Each of the candles here shows the number of times my speed measurement fell in a particular range. I did about 50 samples this month, about the same as previous. So it's still peaking nicely compared to September's, well, pretty random speeds, but not as tightly clustered as October. My average download speed in November was 137 megabits per second. Median was 128. My slowest speed test was 15, and the highest was 295 megabits per second. The average upload speed improved a little bit to 11 megabits per second, and the ping time improved remarkably from 55 to 48 milliseconds. By the way, I always set my speed test server to the same location, a Bell Canada site in Ottawa. So if you think about it, my signal goes from my cottage in Ontario to the satellite, say 1,000 kilometers away, back to a ground station in the northern US somewhere, which is probably about 1,000 kilometers again. And that round trip takes only 6 or 7 milliseconds by light speed. The remainder of this time would be the routing time through the ground network to Ottawa. It's interesting to consider how little of the ping time is getting to and from the satellites, maybe about 15%. Now, somebody asked me last month about the performance of the Starlink box as a Wi-Fi router. Well, that's a tough question to answer. Your Wi-Fi experience depends on a huge number of factors. The walls in your house, other Wi-Fi signals in the area, electrical noise, and most importantly, how good the antennas are in your receiving devices. Now, I do have 2 Ubiquiti access points on my property, and that's what I connect to. So I've never really noticed a problem. And by the way, they're not even set to the highest power settings. But nonetheless, I installed a Wi-Fi analyzer in my phone, grabbed a clipboard, and wandered around taking readings. So here's a diagram of my property. The round dot is my dish. The star is my Starlink router. One of my access points is just on the other side of the wall. So I'll show you comparison measurements for that. Right in front of the Starlink box, I measured minus 28 dB on the analyzer on Starlink's 2.4 gigahertz band and minus 42 dB on the Ubiquiti box. Now remember, that's on the other side of the wall, so it makes sense that its measurements are worse. And yeah, the way you read this is minus 42 is weaker than a minus 28. The 5 gigahertz band showed a similar difference. Surprisingly, I got almost exactly the same measurements 12 meters or 40 feet away at the other end of the house. But in my office over the garage, just a little bit further away, the signal had degraded to minus 63 dB and the Ubiquiti signal was almost gone at minus 75. Exterior walls, metal roofing, and the fact that there's a circuit breaker panel right in between these points probably explains this difference. I do have a second Ubiquiti AP in my office over the garage, but this is the measurement to the one in the house. As these power readings go down, by the way, so does your link speed. I was down to about 40 megabits per second in my office. I then made several measurements outside at extreme points on my property, between 30 and 40 meters from the Starlink box. The 2.4 gigahertz signals still registered, but at very low numbers of around minus 70 dB. I was still able to connect on my phone, but with link speeds in the 20 megabits per second range, which is pretty lousy. The 5 gigahertz signal no longer even registered on the analyzer. So what does all this tell you? Well, not much, admittedly, but it does suggest that the Wi-Fi on the Starlink box is pretty decent, probably on par with most regular household Wi-Fi units. And if you have a large house or big property, you'll need to set up some additional access points or boosters to maintain good signal strength as you move away from the box. My last topic for November, again inspired by a viewer question. How much does the Starlink dish move as satellites track across the sky? Well, I knew the answer, but I set up a 2-hour time lapse nonetheless, and here is the exciting result. Yeah, the most boring time lapse ever. Not even many clouds that day. Bottom line? No, the dish doesn't move a bit. It tracks the satellites, which zip across in a matter of seconds, electronically through the marvel of phased array antenna technology, also known as magic. Anyway, that's it for November. Some updates on the new hardware, outage and speed performance, Wi-Fi measurements, and yes, the dullest time lapse ever. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for notifications of my next update. Thanks for watching.